Hello and welcome to another episode of Internet Marketing Revealed. My guest today is Matt Richards. He's a prominent social media coach based in the UK, and he has quite an interesting backstory, which I'm really looking forward to talking about today, where he cleared over £60,000 worth of debt. He overcame a drug addiction to become this successful social media coach, which he is today, which has actually seen him provide training in over 55 countries around the world. As I mentioned just now, he's very prominent on social media, but he's also branched out into podcasting and also YouTube marketing. So we do have quite a lot to talk about today. So I'm really hoping that time isn't going to get away from us too much. But first of all, welcome to the show, Matt.
Mate, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. You know, it's awesome to come on to shows and chats like this because it opens up a lot of different content and stuff like that. That's hopefully going to help a few people as well. So I appreciate you having me on.
No problem at all. So I know that you do have this backstory that we're going to cover in just a sec. But before we get into that, can we talk a little bit about your life before that?
Yeah.
Where you grew up and all that kind of thing.
So I'm from Wolverhampton. You might not be able to tell from my accent. I've spent a lot of time being a coach trying to change it because it's probably one of the hardest ones to understand in the UK. I'm from Wolverhampton. Grew up. I had a good upbringing, to be honest with you. I'm not one of these. I had a bad upbringing. I haven't got like any stories from my childhood that are like anything bad happened or anything like that. We literally went through school pretty much as a bit of a class joker, I finished with good qualifications, but most of my work was done in the last month of school. I was like come to the end of school, I was like, damn, I kind of need to have something to show for it. So I'll be honest, I passed through most of my exams from pure memory of just reading books and just literally ticking the boxes on the exams. I had no knowledge of what I was actually doing. And then literally from that point, after leaving school, I went to go and work with my dad. My dad's got a building company. He's got a block paving, landscaping company. And I spent a fair few years there, to be honest with you, because every 6 weeks holidays and stuff like that, my dad dragged me into work. He'd be like, listen, you're not sitting around being lazy. You're not sitting in the house doing nothing. You either come to work with me or you go and find another job, right? And that was the case. It was like there was no room for me to sort of just chill, like I think naturally as a kid, you want to just chill and play PlayStation. That was me. But there's none of that. My dad is like, yeah, you can do that in your spare time, but you got to go and earn your money first, So I went straight to work with my dad, worked with my dad for a few years, working with family. If anybody's ever done that, you know full well it's fireworks. My brother worked alongside us as well. So between the fighting and the arguing and shouting at each other, we was actually pretty damn good at what we did, the landscaping and sorting people's gardens out, whatever. And then eventually I went into working into a warehouse because I just got sick and tired of working in the rain and cold and digging holes in the snow. So that was my journey up until then. I went into sort of martial arts and stuff like that afterwards,
Okay. So how did you first get into the martial arts then? Was that always something that you were interested in as a kid? Did you grow up watching the likes of Karate Kid and get inspiration from that? Or
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I've always had some level of interest in it, like boxing and martial arts. But for me, it was honestly, I remember in my primary school days, I was bullied at school. I wasn't in the cool club, I was bullied, right? So it's like, I think there's always been this thing inside of me where I wanted to do something that was cool, And I think that's probably a subconscious thing. Looking back now, with all the work I've done with mindset and coaching, I understood exactly why I did it. But back then, it was a case of, well, I want to do something cool because then maybe I'll be a cool person. Do you know what I mean? Because when you spend so much time out of the cool gang, you spend most of your time worried about getting into the cool gang. Now, funnily enough, when we grow up now, people these days tend to grow up with a very different mentality, which is a case of lump it, like it or lump it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas there wasn't really that much around when I was a kid. I'm not that old, but at the same time, I think we've come a long way as a human race over the last 15, 20 years in regards to accepting people that are different and accepting people from different backgrounds, etc. So to me, the martial arts was just a chance for me to become cool. And I love doing it at the same time. I've got a bit of an aggressive personality, but I want to say to people, I've never hurt anybody. I think sometimes if you say you've got an aggressive personality, they're like, oh, he just beats up everybody he sees. I've never had a fight outside of a ring. There's only ever been once or twice when I've had to use self-defense. I won't get into that. But like, I'm not an aggressive, I'm not really a hurtful person, but I'm very much a case of a red personality, somebody that was a bit of a bull in a china shop. So, martial arts for me was a good way to sort of express that without doing damage to people around me. It's like if you've got this thing inside, like a bit of rage built up inside of you, go and hit a punch bag for a few hours, and all of a sudden the world feels like a better place. So it was good for me for discipline, and it was good for me to sort of just feel like I was doing something a little bit cool.
Yeah. So what martial arts did you get into then?
I started off in karate and self-defense classes. So I remember when I first started, my dad used to come with me because he was like, well, I want to come with you. And I'm not sure if he was interested or if it was a case of he wanted to keep an eye on me at the same time. So I started off in like karate. I did that for like 4 or 5 years, got some, 4 or 5 months, got some gradings and stuff like that. But then I realized like UFC was starting to get big on the TV, and cage fighting really started to become a thing. So I was like, do you know what? I want to do that. So after that, the following few years, I focused a lot on Muay Thai, which is from Thailand. If anybody's ever seen it, what is it now? They call it there's an actual phrase for it. I can't remember it live on whatever. But basically, with Muay Thai, that was probably the most vicious sport on the planet. And I was like, well, throw myself in the deep end, right? Everything pretty much goes: knees, elbows, punches, kicks, whatever, right? And I took that bit of an obsession with Muay Thai. And then I also liked the idea of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because the whole point of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was to take away what everybody else has. So if you've got a boxer, you take his arms away from him. If you've got a kickboxer, you take his legs away from him. So it was a case of, to me, it was a self-defense that I could utilize in the day-to-day world, whereas no disrespect to some of the others, but I found them a lot more situational, whereas Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is more a case of self-defense. I didn't want to go out and beat people up, but if somebody wanted to beat me up, I wanted to be in a position I could look after myself, So it was a much more passive type martial arts. So that's what I got into.
Yeah, that's totally fair enough. Growing up on the mean streets of Wolverhampton,
Oh,
you never
mate,
know.
yeah.
You never know what kind of situation you'll find yourself in. Yeah, so I can understand why you'd want to do that, and to combine that then with the more vicious sounding Mai Tai, you'd be, quite the weapon.
Yeah, you know what, mate? I was good at what I did. I was good because I've always had this personality in life, an addictive personality, which has been my biggest asset and also been my biggest downfall at times. Is I can't just do something. I have to either be the best or I have to be competitive, or just. And some people think that's a downside. To me, it does have downsides to it, but at the same time, I think it's got a lot of plus sides as well, because you don't tend to play games too often. You tend to kind of go for what you want. And it was just, it just allowed me to build a really solid foundation for my life moving forward. I mean, even now, I don't practice martial arts as much anymore. I will go and hit the punch bag and stuff. But the whole discipline behind it, I mean, martial arts, people seem to think of martial arts as just going and beating people up in the street randomly and acting how hard you are. I mean, like when I tell people I used to be a cage fighter, half of them are like, really? Because there's like this sort of negative stigma around like martial arts and cage fighting. You're a thug. You like to beat people up. You like to lamp people or whatever. And that wasn't me. To me, it was just about discipline. What I learned from martial arts was to respect people. That's why I never hit anybody outside a ring, because to me, there's ways to deal with things in life that don't involve punching somebody's head in. And so what you'd expect me to get from martial arts was actually the complete opposite. It was more a case of the discipline, the respect. I've always got manners for people, always respect people's time, personal space. And that for me, I just think I don't like to sort of say what people should do with their kids, but I think it's something people should look to integrate into their lives. Martial arts, just for the self-defense aspect, but also for the respect aspect and that stuff like that as well, just to have some sort of respect for other people. Because I think once you harness some sort of power, which a martial arts allows you to do so, I think it teaches you a little bit more respect around it and respecting other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned that you did cage fighting as well. So how far did you take this uh, passion for martial arts then?
I mean, initially it started out with just a few interclub competitions with Muay Thai. So basically, with interclub competitions, you put a couple of pads on, put a headgear on, and you go and fight somebody else from wherever they've come from, right? You get people from all over the country, sometimes different countries, right? And that's where it started. A few competitions like that. Now, my very first fight in Muay Thai, I'd been training for about 6 or 7 months, and like I said, throw myself in the deep end. I went straight to the main event of a local event, and it was my first fight. I've been training less than 6 months. I went up against the guy that had been fighting for years. To be honest with you, he had a record that was a lot longer than mine. Mine was 0-0-0. His was more like 6-5 and whatever. So he had like 10, 12 fights. And literally there's thousands of people. And it was an awesome fight because it was just two people standing in the middle of the ring, just beating the crap out of each other. Basically, it was like the classic Rocky film. I've got the video somewhere on my laptop, and we just literally hammered each other for like 4 rounds, and like it was awesome. And I just loved the buzz. I loved the feeling. And then sadly in the 5th round, all I wanted to do was get to the end because I was the underdog. I went straight to main event. Like I was fighting an experienced fighter. I probably shouldn't have been there, being honest with you, but at the same time, I loved it. The last round, I got caught with a leg kick across the temple here, and just completely flatlined me. I woke up in a hospital, and I got blue lighted to a hospital. I had to go and have a proper brain scan and check for concussion and all this type of stuff, like a scan. And for a lot of people, that would put them off. They'd be like, damn, like, dude, you've had a brain scan in your first fight. Why don't you just like find something else to do with your time, But for me, it lit a fire inside of me, which was like, I want to go again, but I don't want to lose next time. So that's when fighting really started to become a serious thing for me. I mean, I would train 5 or 6 hours a day. I'd wake up in the morning at like 5, 6 a.m. so I could get 2 hours of training in before I got my building work with my dad at like 7:30. And then when I finished working with my dad like 4 or 5, I was back in the gym for 6, and I'd stay there till 10 o'clock at night. And I would do that 5, 6 days a week. And I just become obsessed with it. I loved it. I was entering tournaments. I was driving up and down the country in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments, taking gold medals. I think I won like 6 or 7 gold medals. I just took things really seriously. I just loved it. And then after that, it was like, well, I kind of want to get in the cage now. And from that stage, I went from just literally doing a few competitions and a few full contact fights into becoming like a semi-professional cage fighter or mixed martial artist. And it allowed me to just sort of have fun. I loved fighting. I did love fighting, even though it's funny because when somebody says they love fighting, you'd think they'd be fighting all the time. I just love being in the ring because it was just like two people just going at it. And at the end of it, you shake hands and then you train and you come back harder next time. Whereas like, to me, I thought that was awesome. Whereas fighting in general, I thought was ridiculous. People fighting in the street or punching somebody and trying to hurt them and for no real reason. I think get in the cage, have a fight and shake hands afterwards. I think that's how problems should be solved. It should be like, if you got a problem with somebody, stick your gloves on and go and have a fight. I mean, go and sort it out and then shake hands and move on, or try and use your words or whatever. But I just loved it. I really, really did love it. And I took it very seriously, and it took me some really good paths. But then, it's one of those things that people look at and get the wrong impression of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What was the timeline then before you were hospitalized in your first fight to going into the cage for the first time?
Probably about 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. You don't mess about.
No, I got knocked out in front of 1,000 people. I was like, I need to fix this, man. I had like my friends that came there, my family was there. My mom never came to any fight. She's like, I'm not going to any of that crap. There's no way I'm going there watching you getting your head punched in. I don't want to see that. I'm like, well, cheers for the confidence boost, mom. I'm going to try not to get my head punched in next time. But 2 or 3 months from that, I was in the cage. There was an event that was local, and this guy said, we've got a crowd of like a couple of 1,000 people here. Do you want to come and have a fight? And I was like, yeah, why not? Let's have a go and see how it goes. And my first fight lasted, I think it was 65 seconds. 65 seconds, I won with a guillotine choke. This guy had come all the way over from the other side of Wales. And I remember training like 12 weeks for a fight that lasted 65 seconds. And I went undefeated as a mixed martial artist, actually. So I had 3 semi-professional fights, and only 2 of them lasted longer than 70 seconds.
Wow. So you had
only
a
one
natural,
of them, sorry.
So you had a natural flair or a natural talent for the fighting. Did you ever consider then that could be some kind of career for you?
Oh, for sure. That's where I saw myself. I trained and sparred against, I remember having a training session against the great Royce Gracie. Now, if people don't know who Royce Gracie is, he's basically the Muhammad Ali of cage fighting. Like, if you go onto the UFC and search Hall of Fame, like probably the most popular and most well-known person is Royce Gracie, because he put the whole, he was doing mixed martial arts back when mixed martial arts wasn't as cool as it is now. So what the way mixed martial arts used to work was you'd have somebody that would be a boxer, and then you'd fight a karate person, or you'd have a kickboxer that would fight a jiu-jitsu person. And that's what it was all about, was trying to find the best martial arts. Like, and that was called the Ultimate Fighting Championship. You know, people like Ken Shamrock and the wrestlers and stuff like that. That's where they started. So Royce Gracie was basically the guy that would fight somebody that's like 10, 20 stone heavier than him, or these hardcore boxers that nobody would play with and touch it. And he would literally destroy them with jiu-jitsu. He'd just literally get them on the floor and have them squealing like a pig and giving up like in no time. So to meet and spar alongside somebody like that really lit a fire underneath me, thinking, you know what, like, he kicked my ass. I'm not going to pretend this was even. Like, he literally destroyed me. For the size of him, he's only like a foot taller than me, and he's not stocky, but I felt like I was wrestling somebody that was like 35 stone. It was ridiculous. Like, it was just like wrestling the Hulk. So when I sparred alongside somebody like that and shook his hand and spoke to him, I was like, this is it, man. That's what I want to do. I want to go and fight. I want title fights. And I had 3 fights, won all 3 fights. I had one more fight, and then we was talking about titles, but I never got that far.
Okay, so it seems that you had literally the world at your feet, or your opponents at the very least, from what you say there, given your undefeated status. So what went wrong then?
What went wrong was at the end of my third fight lasted, I think it was like 65 seconds. I won with an armbar. So this guy had come over from Wales. I had a lot of people come from Wales trying to beat me up. It was kind of crazy. And this guy come over from Wales. I won with an armbar in the first round, and it just felt great because as I began to go through martial arts, my crowd grown, and I become a lot more popular. You know, so instead of having like 20 people buy tickets to my fight, now I was the top ticket seller in the roster. I was taking like 200 tickets. I was taking 150 tickets, and these people was buying them, and it just felt good. So when I went out after my third fight, which you go out, have a drink with people, stuff like that, I just felt popular. And I think now looking back, it goes back to those days of me being bullied and stuff like that. I just wanted to fit in. And all of a sudden I felt like I was a cool person. You know, there's people coming up to me, shaking my hand. There's people buying me drinks. There's people. And I just kind of liked the whole feeling of being around people and being a bit more popular than I was. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, from that point, I tried Class A drugs for the first time, in particular cocaine. And I tried drugs for the first time, and literally that was it. I was hooked almost immediately. I mean, if anybody's ever had any experience with Class A drugs or cocaine in particular, it's one of those drugs that just literally grab you, and that's it. And even me, as mentally strong as I was in a position where I was like, no, I can take it. It's fine. I'll do a bit and then I'll get back into my training. But that never materialized. You know, once I sort of took that path, that was it. It was a case of the only thing that mattered to me anymore was getting out and taking drugs. And what started as like a one night thing turned into like 4 or 5 days a week type thing. Do you know what I mean? And that was it then. You can't take drugs and then go and fight at the same time, because that's just not possible. Plus, I wasn't turning up to training either. So that's when literally I ruined everything in the space of about 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, so that sounds like a very fast escalation
Yeah, like
down
everything
the other
else.
side of the hill, compared to your fast ascension to going from a martial artist to a cage fighter. Then you come down the other side of the hill then, where it's just this downward spiral. So were you with your now wife at that time as well?
Yeah, we've been together since we was like 15. So I met my wife on MSN Messenger, if anybody remembers that. The classic chat up line, ASL was the one that did the damage, right? That was it. We was together. So my wife's been with me, well, back then obviously she's my girlfriend, but she's been through the whole entire process with me. And I think that was probably the only reason I'm still here today, because my drug addiction got so bad that I would be going out and going missing for like 3 or 4 days at a time. And it wasn't a case of like me going out on these crazy partying things. I would just be like taking drugs and drinking, and that would be it. You know, it wasn't like, if people get the impression of somebody being out for 4 days, they expect you to be on a yacht with like thousands of women, like loving life, like Dan Bilzerian type thing. It was nothing like that. It was just a case of sitting around with other people that like to take drugs and taking drugs and drinking and talking crap most of the time, but I would do that. The thing is with cocaine is it sort of, you lose the ability to understand time. So what I thought was like a night out was actually like 3 nights out, because you can literally start taking cocaine and throughout the evening, all of a sudden you look at your time and you're like, damn, it's Monday. And you went out at like Saturday. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like time goes so fast. So that was the biggest problem with it, was like when I was talking to my wife, she was like, no, you need to come home. It was almost like, it was like going to the pub for an hour with your mates. And what it felt like was having your wife phone you an hour later, like, you need to come home. Wait, I need to stay out. I've only been out a little bit, like, God, I've been here for 1 hour. And that's where a lot of the friction started, was because my mind was so messed up that when I was out for days, I was thinking I was out for hours. And that was the crazy thing about it. So the fact that she stood by me, I have no idea why, but the fact that she stood by me is probably the only reason I'm still here right now, because I was on a path of self-destruct, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that's interesting where you mentioned the concept of time there. So if you weren't really aware of how long you were out of the house for, I guess then that meant you didn't really, I suppose, take into account or comprehend the impact that was having on your wife and your family, who must be now kind of looking on from afar now, looking at this kind of spiral into destruction.
Yeah, like that was probably the worst bit, was because obviously a phone battery will only last for like a few hours. So for this period of time, my phone would be dead as well. So they're sitting there thinking like, is he dead? Has he been kidnapped? Has this happened? Has that happened? And the thing is with drugs, it messes up your mind so bad that you always think you're in the right. So I'd have somebody phone me up panicking after 4 days. Sometimes this could have been like somebody I knew. Sometimes this could have been a family member. And I'm literally in a position like, why are you going mad? Why don't you calm down? I'm not going to come home if you're all going wild at me. And also as well, when you're in that position and you're taking the drugs consistently, it's almost like you're scared of reality, because you're like, well, I'm going to go back to an earful anyway. I'm going to go back to all these people having to go at me anyway. I might as well stay out an extra day. I might as well stay here. And it's almost like you're scared to go back to reality, but not just because of the whole argument aspect of things, but also when you're taking drugs, what goes up must come down, and you could be on top of the world taking drugs, going wild. And it wasn't just one form of drugs. I mean, I remember once I went to go and visit a friend in jail, and when you go and visit people in jail, you have to do a drug test. And then the dog sniffer dog will come around, you do a drug test. And I remember once I was tested for 14 different substances and I failed for 12 of them. Right. And like looking back, it was like, damn, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's one of those things that is funny and isn't funny at the same time. But like I failed for 12 of 14 different substances. Like there's what was on there? There was like ketamine on there, there was speed on there, MDMA was on there, there was ecstasy was on there, there was all these different drugs, right? There was cocaine was on there, cannabis was on there. I failed for pretty much all of them, right? And so it wasn't just like one drug, it was like everything, these were just crazy drug filled binges, right? And I remember failing. This lady stood in front of me and she's like, well, you couldn't possibly have taken all those drugs, could you? And I'm like, no. And she's like, the machine must be broken. She let me in to go and visit my friend anyway. And I'm like, your machine's spot on. Like I've taken all those in the last 48 hours, But that's the kind of position I got in, is my mind was so messed up. I felt like I was right and everybody else was wrong. And that was probably the worst part about it, was you don't even know what you're doing is wrong. You just think it's the most acceptable thing. And you start to think, why isn't everybody else doing this? And that's why I really sympathize with addicts these days, is because some people look at them and say, well, screw that person, they're an alcoholic or they're a drug addict and this. But the thing is, when you've been in that position, it's almost like people will say to you, why are you doing that? You got kids, you got family. But when you're in that position, you don't care about yourself, never mind anybody else. So it's such a weird space to be in. And like I said, what goes up must come down. So the periods of time when I wasn't on the drugs was when my mental health took like a serious hit, like failed suicide twice. When I say fail, I had a really good go at it. I didn't want to wake up anymore, because I knew what I was doing was wrong in the downtime, but that didn't stop me from doing it again. And then I'd go high again, and then I'd be scared of coming back down again. And then when I come back down, I'm like, I don't want to go high, but if I don't go high, I'm going to stick like this. So it was like, it's like your head's at war with yourself. It's like having a war in your own mind. And it's almost like whatever you do is the wrong decision. If I stay off the drugs, I'm going to feel like shit. So I'll take the drugs. If I take the drugs, then I'm going to be back in this position next week. And that's why I thought to myself, there's no other way out of this. Like I got nothing to live for. I'm not going to be able to change this. I'm stuck. And that was where I found myself, in a position where I had all this debt hanging over my neck. Drugs aren't cheap. I literally some of the nights out, you could go out and spend hundreds of pounds, right? And that was the position I found myself in. Was like, shit, what do I do now? And it was just a horrible feeling.
Yeah, it sounds like you were caught up in a real vicious cycle
Yeah.
there. And yeah, I can completely empathize there that it would be difficult to think that there is a way out of that. And
Mhm.
you just touched upon there then that the drugs weren't cheap. So
No,
is that what fueled that tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt?
it didn't help because the thing is, what happened was my daughter was born on the back end of the drug addiction, right? So for the last for the first 6 months of my daughter's life, I was still a drug addict, right? So what happened is I've I didn't think of myself as a bad parent, but I was a bad parent because of what I was doing, right? But in regards to, I don't want people to get the wrong impression here, because if people think of drug addict and they think of like parent and they think of somebody who's in debt, they think of somebody that's like the kids are walking around in rags and they're going taking loads of drugs. It wasn't like that, and that's what happened with the debt. That my daughter still had all the best clothes. My daughter still went on holidays. We still did things like a normal family. I was a secret drug addict for 2 years. I just want to mention that as well. Nobody knew I took drugs, because it was kind of like I went from a martial artist and I've got an amazing family, like a great family on both sides, Zoe's family and my family. So the idea of me taking drugs was just ridiculous to these people. So I went through all this pretty much on my own. They sort of saw me going out and they just thought, oh, he's going through some crazy period in his life where drinking and stuff and partying is wild, or maybe they thought some other stuff. I don't know. But I don't think any of them thought like he's addicted to drugs, right? So that's what happened. Is I kind of lived this as a bit of a secret for a while. And then literally as my daughter was born, like we would always get her the best clothes, best stuff. So debts would rack up, like next bills, this bill, that bill, taking out loans to cover the house and stuff. Because I wasn't on a lot of money either. I was on like a basic wage. So I was on like a bit of a basic wage and living far beyond my means. And before you know it, you're 50, 60 grand in the hole, because you take one loan to pay another loan, and this one has better interest, that has lower interest. And then in a period of time, you're kind of taking really bad financial decisions just to get by. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to now we manage debt. So if I take a loan on now, it's to pay something else, and then I'll use this to pay that. I've got much more financial knowledge. But I don't really take much like that anymore, to be honest with you. It's kind of put me off. But back then I didn't have that. It was a case of if somebody was willing to give me money, I was like, yes, I'll take it. I'll worry about the interest later, and then I'll pay this. And then that's what kind of left me in a really bad mess, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the phrase robbing Peter to pay
Oh, mate, that
Paul
was me.
uh,
I was
springs to mind there, and
expert
yeah,
at
it sounds like you were. Yeah, it
that.
sounds like you were in that situation. So, at what point then was there a particular scenario where you thought, "I've had enough of this. Things have to change for me"?
Yeah, I think for me, it was at the lowest point of the depression and the mental health side of things. If anybody's ever been through depression, they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about there. The trouble is now with depression, it's a word that's just thrown around left, right, and center, right? It's like people feel a little bit sad and they're like, oh, I'm depressed. To me, personally, what depression was there was no feelings. I remember like there was so many. I didn't love myself. I didn't love anybody else. I mean, sometimes I would just literally sit and stare at a wall for hours, and to me that was acceptable. It was like, yeah, whatever, right? So I wasn't scared from my life ending. I didn't really want to live. I didn't care if I lived or not. It was just like this feeling of like really just not bothered at all. Do you know what I mean? And I remember once holding my daughter, and like I said, she's like a little doll. She's like 6 7 months old, and I remember holding her, and I was like, I know I should love her, but I don't feel like I do. And it was such a weird feeling now because I know you're a family man yourself. The idea of not loving your own kids is just insane, right? But I was so messed up mentally, it was almost like I just felt numb towards everyone and everything. Like it was almost like I know what I should feel, but it's just not there. And it was just like I just felt like I was trapped inside of my own body and my emotion switch had just been switched off. And then I was like, that kind of hit me like a brick wall. Then I was like, Matt, you really are effed up, right? I'm trying not to swear, but like you really are. Like you're here holding your daughter and you think this thought process is acceptable. You've got somebody here that depends on you in your future, and you think it's acceptable to just not wake up in the morning or just to not be here anymore. And that kind of then started, like, my mind started working. I was like, right, I need to start making some decisions. So I stopped going out and drinking for a period of time. I found myself in a job because I had the idea, well, if I can start loads of different things, then that's going to give me the excitement to want to try something new, right? Or it might bring my fire back. I tried the martial arts. I couldn't get back into it because once the fire was gone, the fire was gone. And also, every time I went back to train, I couldn't just train because somebody would be like, hey, you're fighting again, or fighting. It was so much pressure to sort of get back to being the old man. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it was just working in a warehouse. I was packing dog meat and chocolate. I just want to emphasize this because this is kind of a funny story as well. I remember I did an interview once and I said I was packing dog meat and chocolate, and I got sent over like this horrible message in Messenger, like, you're like the most sick, horrible human being I've ever met. What a sick individual. How can you do stuff like that? Because when I wrote I was packing dog meat, they thought it was literally like minced dog or like minced animals or something, right? So when I say, for the international people who might be listening to this, dog meat is like a phrase we use for dog food, right? So like a tin of dog food. So, anyway, that's what I was doing for a living. And then at that period of time, my wife signed up to a network marketing company without me knowing, with my credit card. So I was like, you know what I mean? It started to get a bit grouchy. And it kind of, from there, it started a crazy journey where I was like, started to meet new people, started to connect with new people. So I started off as like a network marketer, made some good money, and then started this whole personal development journey that kind of brought me to where I'm at today. You know what I mean? This whole process of going out there, helping people, and doing good things and making money at the same time. I think it distracted me for long enough to reprogram that need in my brain that that's the life that I needed. And the distraction for me was enough, and I think anybody that's going through mental health issues, I'm no expert. I'm not a psychiatrist, not a counselor. But for me personally, it was having something to focus on that I could love and enjoy, but meant that I can get around different types of people as well, because it was environment that made me become a drug addict. Being around the wrong type of people consistently is what did that. So if in order to be able to do that in a negative way, we can also use that in a positive way by hanging around the right type of people and, potentially moving yourself forward that way.
Yeah. So you got into the network marketing then, and at what point then did you think, right, well, network marketing by itself isn't enough. I need to take this on to the next level. And you decided that coaching was going to be your calling, your vocation going forward.
Well, I did a lot of different things, right? I mean, I started as a networker in a couple of different companies. I was an affiliate marketer, and I was good at what I did. I remember once in a company, I sold over £15,000 worth of product in 1 month. So I knew a thing or two about selling. That was me personally. It wasn't a team or anything. But I love the whole idea of network marketing, and I love the whole idea of sort of like, building a team and training people and helping people to become better. I think maybe it's because of my background. I was like, well, I've come from a shitty place. I want to see if anybody else is feeling pretty crappy or they want to improve, and I can help them. So I started as network marketing. Then I moved into affiliate marketing, so representing other people's products to sell. As that, I was ranked as a top rank affiliate for like 6 months running, out of 100,000 marketers. Some huge names. I'm not going to name drop because that's not my style. But like there's some huge names on this list, and I was ranking alongside them. Some of these marketers have been around for like 20, 30 years. And so from that point, I was kind of like, well, I quickly realized that I loved the online industry, but I wanted to be in a position where I could work with anybody that I wanted. Whereas if you're in a company, it's almost like sometimes it's kind of like a bit of a war. Like, we've got this tribe over here, we've got this tribe over here, we've got this tribe over here, and we're all fighting. My company's the best, my product's the best, my opportunity's the best. And I didn't like that aspect of it, So I was like, I want to be able to go over to that tribe and work with those people. I want to go over to that tribe and work with those people, because I just loved working with people in general. So me becoming a coach was a way for me to say, like, listen, guys, I'm not perfect. God, I used to take drugs, 60 grams worth of debt. I messed up my life, but here's what I did to make some good money. Here's what I did to make some sales. And once I started generating the results, that was kind of like my new drug for me, because somebody had come to me and say, Matt, I made $1,000 this week, or Matt, I've recruited for the first time, or Matt, I made some sales. And that kind of started a snowball effect for me. And I was like, damn, I kind of love this whole idea of, helping other people to achieve something, because that was the type of person I was before the drugs. In my martial arts, I used to turn up an hour early to class because there was young kids. We'd have different stages. and I'd stay around the young kids, helping them hold the pads and teaching them to keep the hands up and stuff like this. After the class, I would stay an hour the same, just to stay behind, see if there's anybody less experienced than me. Let's get your arm bar tight. Let's help you with a cross choke. Let's help you with this leg lock. So it was always a case of me trying to help other people, but this really gave me a platform in order to be able to do that.
Yeah. So with your early stages then as a coach, how were you trying to attract customers or to make yourself known, to try to position yourself as a coach in the industry who's capable of helping other people get results?
Back then, it was a case of Periscope. Periscope was it was before we had Facebook Live. We had Periscope, which was the first. I'm not sure if it's the first, but it was one of the first live video streaming softwares. Where you could literally go on there and people give you hearts and stuff. I don't know if it's still around anymore, but like I just thought to myself, you know what? I kind of like being on camera. I didn't like being on camera because I'll be honest, I was a natural introvert. So the whole idea of being on camera to me was like petrifying, right? But I kind of grew to love it. So I started shooting videos, I started putting posts on Facebook, started, doing what people advise you to do, provide content, and over a period of time, people will follow you. But for like the first 6 to 8 months, apart from the people I could sell to who had already known me from what I used to do, like the network marketing, etc., I wasn't really reaching anybody new because nobody would watch my videos. Nobody would comment on my posts. I was writing blog posts. I remember writing like 30, 40 blog posts and nobody read them. It was very much a case of a bit of blind faith. I was like, well, I'm going to keep doing these videos. If somebody watches it, fantastic. But if somebody doesn't watch it, I'm going to get better at videos anyway. So I've got nothing to lose here. So I need to practice. I might as well practice and see if anybody's going to follow me along the way. And that's kind of how I started my business, was all organically. It was like, well, I want something that anybody can do. And if a drug addict, ex-drug addict with 60 grams worth of debt, who has no qualifications or nothing, can jump on and start talking about stuff on the internet, then I want to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible, because I like simple stuff. I'm a simple individual. I like just living a basic life. Regardless how good our business does, I still love to just go and chill on a fishing bank or just go and sit and do nothing. And that's my enjoyment. And some people are like, well, you're sad. But that makes me happy. So this whole idea of keeping things simple was for me. And I think anybody over a period of time, maybe not initially, can just hit that record button and say what's on their mind. And that's how I started to build things initially.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in that position. Everybody starts from zero. Everybody starts online without an audience. And then it's down to how persistent and how consistent you are with the content that you're putting out before you start to gain some traction and see some results. So how long did it take you then from when you first started on social media trying to attract new clients before you actually got that traction and started seeing some results of your own?
It's hard to pinpoint it exact because I was still making sales. I was still closing people. I was making sales. Like I said, I had good success online. It wasn't a case of I was coming online not making any money. I still was making thousands of pounds a month. But what was happening was, it was kind of like I couldn't sort of bridge the gap. Everybody who was buying from me was people that I would be building relationships from a long period of time. Whereas what I wanted to achieve was to have the posture and credibility where people would sort of tell their friends, and then their friends would come and buy my course or invest in me. A bit like we see with like these big gurus online, where people are like, I'm just going to buy his stuff because it's him, right? So in order to get to that stage, I would say probably took me a couple of years. I think you got to be in the driving seat for a period of time. It's almost like you've got to bang the drum long enough until people start to listen, and that was it for me. I think the biggest issue that people have got today is they will go online, and I'm not saying I'm the be all and end all, or like yourself, they'll see people like us who have spent years in our craft and been dedicated to doing things almost daily, and they go online and then they start comparing themselves to them immediately. And I think what people should focus on is less comparing results and more comparing the workload that they put in order to get there. Because when I talk about I don't talk about income too much anymore, because people always think, well, I want that income. And then I'll give them like a list of what I did. And they're like, I don't want that income anymore. It's like hundreds of videos, hundreds of blogs, hundreds of podcast episodes, thousands of posts, messaging loads of people, loads of phone calls that went nowhere. And then when I show them that list, they don't want it anymore. So I always say to people now, if you're going to compare results, be willing to compare the workload as well, because that's going to be the thing which is separating you and them. Nothing to do with results. And it can be to do with like a background. Some people will find it easier than others, but ultimately it does come down to the work you're doing. So I would always say to people, try to, when you come in to start building a brand for the first time, just enjoy it. Just think to yourself, I'm going to be learning, I'm going to get better anyway. So if anybody does follow me along the way, it's a bit of a bonus, because sometimes you can trip yourself over trying to run before you can walk,
Yeah, it is like the old saying, isn't it? It took 20 years to become an overnight sensation.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think people don't appreciate the sheer amount of years worth of time, effort, practicing, honing your craft that goes on before you get that breakthrough. And I think people do give up way too early. But I know that there are a few shortcuts, perhaps, that you can take just to try to fast track your own results as best you can. I'm just thinking about a post that you wrote recently on Facebook where I suppose you were calling people out in a way, because
I do that quite a lot.
what you said was that if you're not making £4,000 a month in whatever business that you're involved in, then you're using your social media inefficiently. Can you just tell us a bit about what you
It
mean
was
by that?
probably more of a general statement, but with a lot of people that I work with, right? Here's how a typical marketer's life goes, and I'm talking about network marketers here, affiliate marketers, coaches, and consultants, right? I'm talking in general. So if this applies to you, great. If this doesn't apply to you, whatever. But as I go through this, you're probably thinking, "Damn, that's me." The way the typical marketer tends to live their life these days is they wake up in the morning, the first thing they'll do is scroll through social media for some reason unknown, right? It's a habit. And this is the trouble with social media now. I think social media is worse than drugs, because with a drug, I'd have to go meet my dealer. I'd have to go and pay for it. I'd have to travel to go and get it. With social media, it's with you constantly. So this is an addiction that you don't even know you got. And this is an addiction you can't break from because it's glued to your hand 24/7, right? I break free from drugs. You can't break free from your phone, because the way technology is going now and the way our kids are growing up, everything's technology based. So a typical marketer will wake up in the morning, right? Scrolling through social media, liking and commenting on people's stuff. Then they'll go and follow some trainer or guru that will say to them, "Hey, you need to hack the algorithm. You need to spend like 2 hours commenting and liking people's stuff." So they're commenting and liking. And then they're being told like you need to do stories as well. So then they're doing like 20, 30 stories, this awkward feeling of having to document everything they do in their whole entire life. And then there'll be the aspect of posting. Oh, I need to post my product. I need to post my opportunity. I need to post my company. They'll post it in groups. They'll post it in buy-sell groups. They'll post it on their profile. And over a period of time, you're talking here like hours, right? And then these same individuals will be contacting people in inbox, and this idea of building relationships, which is also something I've got an issue with, because to me, your content is what should be building your relationships for you. You shouldn't have to actively be in your inbox building relationships with hundreds of people, because that is all time you're taking away from your wife, your husband, your kids. Build a relationship with the people you love. Don't build a relationship with strangers. That's crazy, right? So when you sort of take all that into account, what we have right now is a large percentage of people that are extremely successful on the surface on social media, because everybody is. Everything's great. Nobody shit stinks. Everything's awesome, right? That's the typical marketer. But what we have been behind that are people that are glued to these things for copious amounts of hours per day, and they're just using them hugely unproductively. So when I sort of make that statement, it's a bit of a sweeping general statement, but the whole point is to just get people thinking, am I actually using my time correctly here? Or have I got so caught up in this addiction with social media that I've become fixated on constant stimulation, which is what social media promotes? As you scroll, mental stimulation, the need for mental stimulation gets a lot higher. This is why people can't watch TV without scrolling at the same time. This is why people can't go to the restaurant with their wife or husband without scrolling at the same time. Mental stimulation is one thing. And secondary, the constant need to keep checking and worrying about what people think of you. Half these people don't give a damn, and half these people you're never going to meet in your life. So I think what it does is it gives people a really unhealthy relationship with their business, because to me, a business is to make money. And when people are there like, I want to help people, I want to build relationships, I'm like, well, you probably should have started a charity then, because then there's no pressure for you to make money and you can go and help as many people as you want. But what you've got here is a business, and a business is designed to make money. So if you're going to spend 8 hours making money and you're earning less than X amount of money, you're no different to a day job, but you've got like 10 times more stress because this is glued to you constantly. Whereas a day job, you clock in and clock out.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that as well, because I was caught up myself in a lot of the vanity metrics that go on with social media, always chasing a greater number of likes, spending more time on the news feed, as you say, liking and commenting on posts and trying to push those numbers up uh, ever more. But you're doing that, but you're not really making any money. So yeah, you look like you're a successful marketer. You look like people
It's
are
easy to look
interested.
successful.
Yeah, people look at your post, they look at your engagement, and they think, yeah, this person must be making a load of money because they've got a load of engagement numbers. People are clearly interested in what they've got to say. But you can spend all day doing that and still not make any sales. Now, I know also that sales is something that you're very vocal about on your own social media as well. So why do you think then, I mean, we're in the sales business. Why do you think then that people are so afraid to sell or reluctant to sell or try to avoid doing that at any cost, but still want to make money online?
Well, one thing I like to say, people, is everything is selling. Everything in your life, even if you don't have a business, selling is everything. If you're going for a day job tomorrow, you're going to have an interview. On that interview, you're going to try and sell yourself. If you've got a CV, you're going to write down the reasons why they should employ you. You're trying to sell the idea on why somebody should invest time, money, and effort into you. So everything's a sales process. Even with your kids, Grant Cardone's saying your kids are going to sell you on the idea why they should stay up all night. You're going to sell them on the idea of why they should go to sleep. So everything in life is a sales process, in my opinion. But the trouble that you've got now is on the internet is people are like, no, I'm not a salesperson. I'm just recommending things. And I'm like, that's the same thing. Like if you're recommending something, you're trying to sell people on the idea of getting it, right? And that to me is the big issue, is because you probably growed up in a similar environment to me. And I'm being quite general here, but I'm shooting in the dark. Maybe you didn't, right? But I grew up where if a salesperson knocked the door, I would have my mom or dad in the background going, tell him to piss off and shut the door, right? Or tell him we're not interested and shut the door. Or if he was walking down the town or walking down the street, or whoever brought you up, whoever's listening in, whatever, your parent, guardian, whatever, they would avoid salespeople. Bloke would come walking up to you, big smiley face, clipboard. Get away from this guy, right? So I think what happens is subconsciously over a period of time, we begin to sort of not only become afraid of salespeople, but also assume that they're terrible people. Now, couple that up with the fact that you've got these stories of old ladies buying things they don't need and have been robbed, and all these salespeople and people selling stuff that they shouldn't be selling. And I think what happens is people become this individual where they're like, well, I don't like people hassling me to buy stuff. I grew up and my parents and my family would try and take me away from that. So even if they don't think of this on a conscious level, subconsciously, they don't like selling, right? And their natural reaction is to walk away from that. And I think that's what holds most businesses back right now, is because you can have as many likes and comments as you want. And I'll have this argument with anybody because I get it all the time. These engagement coaches are like, no, you need engagement. I'm like, okay, you ring up British Gas and you tell them you're going to pay in likes and comments this week, and you see how far you get, right? They're going to send people around with the white coat and lock you up because you think that's some sort of currency. What I'm going to do is I'll probably get 10 times less likes and comments than you, but I'll probably make 10 times more in sales as well. Because if you're in an online business, you make money from selling. You don't make money from being popular. You don't make money from being liked. And that's what you get sometimes in these people online. When they're online, they're so fixated on becoming socially popular because they think if more people are seeing my posts, that's going to make up for my crappy sales skills and I'm going to sell more product. That's not the case. If you get some really good, solid sales skills, you don't need as many people to see your posts anymore. That means you don't need to walk around with your phone glued to yourself constantly. You don't need to worry about where your next selfie is being taken. You don't need to worry about 301 stories, because if you're good at selling, the only thing you need to worry about is, what does your diary look like? How many calls have I got booked in? How many Zooms have I got scheduled this week? That's the only metric that matters in your business. When people are measuring likes and comments, that metric doesn't matter. Your metric matters is how full is your diary. Because if your diary is empty, I guarantee you're earning less than $2,000 a month in your business. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the way that you approach that then, if you're only focusing on sales and you're not worrying about all of the superficial stuff that goes
Yeah,
on in social media, then it's a much simpler and a far less stressful way to run
exactly.
an online business. How would you I mean, what would you recommend to people then who are perhaps reluctant to sell? How can they get into that more proactive mindset where they actually want to go out there and make the sale?
I always say to people, selling's a service, not something you do to people. You know, if I'm the best coach on planet Earth, I can't help people improve their business if I can't sell my course, right? I know you're fantastic at copywriting. Some of the copy you put together is awesome, right? You can help a bunch of copywriting, I believe, is probably one of the most important skills in marketing, right? Because the way you carry yourself online and the words that you use is everything, right? So you can't help people with their copywriting if you cannot sell your course, or you cannot sell your consulting, or you cannot sell this. If you've got a weight loss product or a health and wellness product or a great business opportunity, you cannot help people if you cannot sell it. So if a lot of people have got this desire to help people, being able to sell goes hand in hand in that. And I always say this the same way. It's a bit like an air hostess, right? Now, if you're an air hostess listening to this, I don't want to sort of make your job sound easier than what it is, but we're just going to take one aspect of the job. One aspect of being an air hostess is to stand at one end of the plane and walk to the bottom of the plane, maybe halfway, depending on how big it is, and ask all those customers, would you like a cup of tea, sir? Would you like tea or coffee? Would you like a drink? Would you like this? Now, if they wasn't able to do that, a flight experience would be a lot worse for many people, right? So what they do is they walk down and all they do is ask the question, are you interested in tea or coffee? They don't go bawling in tears because somebody says no. They don't start questioning their life decisions like, oh, I've been rejected. This is terrible. I don't like this job anymore. They don't do any of this stuff because it's just their job and they are there to make other people's lives or experiences better. And if you can run your business in the same way and understand that some of these people you meet online aren't going to be very nice to you, the same as an air hostess. Some of them will probably go grunt and ignore them, whatever, right? But it's not going to stop them asking the person that's sitting next to them because that's their job. So if you can adopt the same mentality in your business, which is like, well, I've got something great here that's actually going to improve the life of somebody. I don't really care if you say no to me because there might be somebody next to you that does need it. And I think if people can adopt that mentality of all you're doing is asking a question, if you adopt the mentality of I need to get sales, I need to get sales, I need to get sales, I need to recruit, I need to recruit, I need to recruit, I need to hit a rank, that's when it gets difficult. But if you think to yourself, my job is just to give people a chance to take a look, it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. And I think with selling, a couple of tips I will give people is number one, focus less on what you're selling and more on what it actually does. Right? I hear people time and time again who will talk constantly about how amazing their product is, how awesome their course is, how great this is. People don't give a shit about any of that. What people are quite selfish, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but what I mean is when you're talking to somebody, all they're thinking in the back of their head is two things. What's in it for me? How much is it? And it's as simple as that, right? So instead of dancing around the bush and trying to sort of like talk about stuff that's not relevant or trying to change that, why not just play into that and just get better at dealing with it? So the first tip I would say to people is focus less on what you're selling and more on the outcome. Sell the destination, not the plane. Sell the sizzle, not the steak. When the old saying, go onto Google and look up the training on whether people want a hole in the wall or they want the drill, right? This is what I'm talking about here is get used to actually putting out in front of people what you can actually do for them, what they can expect from investing in you or a product, and begin to paint an image of their lifestyle of what it could look like as a result of that. I think of myself as an artist. I've got ideas up here. The only way I'm going to get somebody to see my idea or see that vision is if I can articulate it in such a way they can understand. And if I go talking about all stats and facts and figures, they're not going to get that because I've been in my company for like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. How am I going to explain that to somebody in 10 minutes? It's impossible. But one thing I can do is I can paint an image of what their life could potentially look like as a result of working alongside me or as a result of investing in me. So, for example, what I'll say to people is instead of saying how amazing my mastermind is or how amazing my course is, I'll be just simply saying to them, imagine a life where instead of chasing loads of people around on social media and instead of being glued to this, you can literally speak to 10 people, probably close 5 of them and switch your phone off for the rest of the day and actually have some time freedom. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's some really good advice there. And it does sound like you've got the whole time efficiency, social media efficiency, and now sales efficiency down to an art. I mean, just out of interest, how long did it take you then to clear that £60,000 worth of debt that you'd accumulated?
It took a few years, not because of the lack of income, but because when you've got that much amount of debt, you owe so many different people. It's almost like you're having to pay that off first, then you have to pay this off, then you have to do this and you have to do that. So over the space of like 2 to 3 years, I could probably have paid it off a bit quicker, being honest with you, but we've lived a great life over the last 6 years as well. So it's not been a case of let's do nothing for 3 years and pay off our debt. We've still been on holiday. We got married abroad. We've still been on cruises. We've still gone and traveled the UK. We still bought the kids nice stuff. We've still had nice cars. At the minute, it's just a normal 7-seater, but I have had nice cars in the past. But like the thing is, like, so I could have paid it. I wouldn't like to give people the wrong impression. Like you can pay it off in a year. I could have paid it off in a year, but it's took me longer to pay it off because it's been a case of, well, that interest rate doesn't go up until like a year's time. So we'll enjoy ourselves at the same time whilst paying it off, because there's no real need to pay it off now and then spend the next 6 months, missing out on loads of things, because our kids are still growing up. They're still young kids, 8 and 6 years of age, got a daughter on the way in February. I think every single second is still important. So I don't want to be one of those people that are like so fixated with finances that I'm not enjoying every single second that passes by as well, because that is the currency that you do need to focus on in life. Money comes and goes. Whatever financial position you're in right now, understand that you can fix it or make it worse. But time is one thing that once it's gone, it's gone. So don't get so fixated on money that you forget how important time is. That's why all my training and everything is all about efficiency. It's all about getting there quicker, because time is a valuable asset. So people think nothing of just throwing away 5 minutes of their time, because they're like, yeah, 5 minutes, whatever. And then, but if you used to go and rob somebody £5, they'd want to kill you. Like, oh, you terrible thief, horrible person. That to me is like fixating on a lump of coal when you have a lump of gold in your hand. Because time is just a tool. Something that, money's just a tool. It's just something that comes and goes. Time's something that's very valuable. So find a way to get more efficient. Find a way to appreciate time a little bit more, and also understand that if you have got debts and stuff hanging over your head, yes, get them paid off and get them sorted, but at the same time, don't forget to live as well, because if you're miserable and you feel like shit, even if you pay the debt off, you're still going to feel like crap anyway.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the impending new arrival.
Cheers, bro. I'm petrified and excited at the same time.
Well, perhaps you've forgotten about the lack of sleep and things like that, but I'm sure you'll get a very rude reminder very, very soon. Now, if anybody does want any help with all of this stuff, perhaps they're in a similar position to what you were in a load of debt, or perhaps they're using their social media really inefficiently at the moment. They're not getting the results that they want, yet on the surface they're living their best life, to coin a well-used phrase. So if anybody does need help turning all of this stuff around and actually getting some results, where is the best place for them to come and find you?
So one thing I will say before I get into that is I've talked a lot about drug addiction, mental health and stuff like that, debt. If you're in a position where you are feeling like really bad, or you feel crap or anything like that, go and get professional help. There's no shame in getting help and support, because I'm a coach and a trainer, but I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychiatrist. There's people out there that are 10 times more qualified than me in like things like addiction and mental health and debt recovery and stuff like that. So I don't want to give people the wrong impression. I think sometimes these days where you kind of get these internet experts and they're like, well, I'm a counselor, I'm a financial specialist, I'm this, all at the same time, just because of their life decisions. All I've shared today is my story and what I've done, and that's what I can do with other people. Best place to find me is just go and reach out to me on Facebook. Just search me Matt Richards. If you put Matt Richards into Facebook or you put Matt Richards into YouTube, you're going to see me pop up. On my profile, you're going to find a link to a podcast, and you find a link to a YouTube channel, find a link to a free group. I got nothing to sell here today. It's not about selling for me, but if you want to sort of follow any of those areas, then that's where you're going to find the majority of my content.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll also put a link to that in the show notes as well, so people will be able to find you very easily as well. So
I appreciate that, man.
No problem at all. thank you so much again for joining me on the episode, and I look forward to following your content as always as well, because you've always got something good to say.
Maybe. Cheers, brother. Thanks for having me on. I
Thanks a
appreciate
lot.
it.
Please visit internetmarketingrevealed.com and davidwalker.net for more free content. If you need a domain name for your business, visit domainsrevealed.com, where you'll find more than 1,000 premium domains. And finally, please rate and review this podcast. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.